So there couldn't be anything cooler than being in Sao Paulo tonight on stage with these people. So thank you for coming and thank you for making this possible. I want to talk about two things: copyright and democracy. Where I come from, when I grew up, this was the picture of culture. This is the picture of culture not so much because the people on the screen were boring and totalitarian like that. People on the screen were people like the Beatles or Dylan or the Dead. But instead what I mean is that the audience looked like this. Couch potatoes, or worse, or even worse, the couch cat. Now this was not totally unforeseen that this is what we would become. 105 years ago, this man, Sousa, traveled to this place, the capital, to talk about these things called talking machines. He was not a fan of these talking machines. Here's what he said: these talking machines are going to ruin the artistic development of music in this country. When I was a boy, in front of every house in the summer evenings, you would find young people together, singing the songs of the day or the old songs. Today you hear these infernal machines going night and day. We will not have a vocal cord left, Sousa said. The vocal cords will be eliminated by a process of evolution, as was the tale of man when he came from the ape. This picture, because of these infernal machines, technology like this and like this produced a culture like that. A culture that enabled efficient consumption, what we call reading, but inefficient, at least amateur production, what we could call writing. A culture good for listening, but not a culture good for speaking. A culture good for watching, but not a culture good for creating. Creating by the millions of ordinary people who sang in Sousa's time and now sat and ate potato chips. And then came the internet. And platforms like YouTube, which changed this culture. Which brought back this spirit we saw in this film, the spirit of remix. In many contexts, most prominently initially in the context of music, almost 7 years ago, we remember this album by the Beatles called The White Album, which inspired this album by Jay-Z called The Black Album, which then inspired this album by DJ Danger Mouse, The Grey Album, which remixed the tracks of the White Album and Black Album together to produce something gray. That's 2004. The equivalent today is somebody like Girl Talk remixes 235 tracks together in a single song as he performs it live on stage. But to me, much more interesting than these individual remixes has been the development of what we could call the community remix. A kind of call and response that the internet has enabled to encourage, to invite people from around the world to create in response to what others have created. So, for example, this video.
Soulja Boy, tell me. Hey, I got this new dance for y'all called the Soulja Boy. You gotta punch and crank back 3 times from left to right. Soulja Boy, I'm in it.
That video inspired this video.
Soulja Boy, tell me. Hey, I got this new dance for y'all called the Soulja Boy. You gotta punch and crank back 3 times from left to right.
Which then inspired to Disney's great horror, this video.
Soulja Boy, tell me. Hey, I got this new dance for y'all called the Soulja Boy. You gotta punch and crank back 3 times from left to right.
Here's another example more recently. You all, I hope, have seen this extraordinary film by John Hughes, The Breakfast Club, 1985. It's what I thought the Brat Pack was, this group of kids. And I'm sure you all know this song by Phoenix, Listomania. And this was their music video, released when they released that song. Somebody got it into their head, what happens if we mix The Breakfast Club and Listomania? And they produced this video. Somebody got the idea, what if we start remaking this video in local townships around the world? So Brooklyn was first. And then San Francisco had to do it. Across the world, there's at least 50 of these remixes that have been made from Amsterdam to Rio, to a bunch of cousins, I don't know what that means, Winnipeg, all remaking the same video from their own perspective. So sentimental. And when you begin to see this, you begin to see what Sousa was romanticizing. When he spoke of the young people getting together and singing the songs of the day or the old songs. But today they're not getting together in a backyard or on a corner. Today they're getting together on a digital platform that connects people freely around the world and invites them to create for each other, to share that creativity, and to celebrate the power of that creativity. A technology like these technologies, not these technologies. Produce a culture like this culture, not this culture. Enabling efficient consumption, reading, and efficient amateur production. Enabling writing as well as listening. Enabling speaking, enabling watching, as well as the power to create. This read-write culture joins the tradition of read-write culture that has existed from the beginning of man, except for this brief slice of time in the 20th century when culture was just read-only. Now the thing we lawyers have to recognize is this is creativity too. This is creativity. And it's as important, might we say more important, than this creativity. It's a different ecology of creativity, but each of these ecologies of creativity is important. The professional ecology that produced the Beatles, or Dylan, or Sousa is important, but so too is the amateur ecology, where amateur doesn't mean amateurish. Amateur means those who create for the love of their creativity and not for the money. kids performing, the stuff on YouTube, the stuff Sousa romanticized. This is an ecology of creativity just as important as the professional. And the copyright system that we lawyers produce must support both. It must support the professional through the incentives professional needs, but it must support the amateur and the scientific through the freedoms that these creators need. Again, copyright needs to do two things, not one. It needs to provide incentives and secure freedoms. Again, because this is important, it is not enough to protect the professional. Copyright must also protect the amateur. It must do two things, not one. Now, the world misses sometimes just how profoundly bad democracy in America is. We don't have a high-functioning democracy in America. The effect of special interests in the way America legislates, a pervasive and corrupting influence, distorts how our government works. It's not how it was planned to be. Our framers planned a republic, by which they meant a representative democracy, by which they meant a democracy that was to be dependent upon the people alone. So here's their model. The people and a government. I do my own graphics. That's my own right there. Pretty cool, right? But the problem here is that Congress has evolved in the United States a different kind of dependence. Not a dependence upon the people, but a dependence upon the funders, the people who fund the campaigns that get people elected to Congress. Between 30 and 70% of the time of a congressman's life is spent raising money to get to Congress. They develop a sixth sense, a constant awareness about how what they do might affect their ability to raise money. They become shapeshifters, constantly adjusting how they view fundamental policy issues as a function of whether it will help them raise money. Leslie Byrne, a Democrat from Virginia, describes how when she went to Congress, she was told by a colleague, quote, "Always lean to the green." Then to clarify, she went on, he was not an environmentalist. Corruption. Not in the sense of money handed out in brown paper bags, not the kind of corruption that Rod Blagojevich was convicted of, the governor of Illinois, but instead a kind of dependency corruption, a wrong type of dependency upon campaign cash, distorting what they do. It yields cynicism in America. 75% of Americans believe money buys results in Congress, and yields a profound lack of trust in our government. According to the last Gallup poll, 11% of the American public has faith in Congress. 11%. I should put that in Congress. Context. There were more people at the founding of the United States who believed in the British Crown than who have faith in our Congress today. Now, this corruption has consequences. It has consequences for copyright. It produces the kind of copyright extremism that defines American policy today. Extremism that has produced a war. We fight many wars, but the one I'm talking about here is the copyright wars. Wars which my friend, the late Jack Valenti, referred to as his own, quote, terrorist war, where apparently the terrorists in this war are our children. Now, this war has been exported. It's been exported to many places, but it's also been exported here. And you need to resist this war. You need to live in this balance between the anti-copyright forces and the extremist pro-copyright forces, between these extremes. And if there was one place in the world where there was hope, that was possible. It was here. Today there's mixed hope that it's possible here. On the one hand, this country is, as my friend and hero Gilberto Gil, quoting another friend and hero, Claudio Prado, says, the advantage of Brazil is that you get to skip from the 19th century to the 20th century. You get to skip the 20th century, this century of closed, read-only culture, and celebrate the kind of culture you've always been, untouched by this perversion. For here, this read-write culture survives. It's how you breathe. And number two, here there is progress, legal progress. Today, the President signed the Civil Rights Framework, which, when sent to Congress, will be an important set of principles defending internet rights in this country. But we should also say here there was progress. December of 2009, I was here celebrating a project for an extraordinarily important change in copyright law that would have been the most important liberal advance in copyright law anywhere in the world. The most progress anywhere was happening here. Brazil was a leader. It took the lead on the development agenda in WIPO, pushing WIPO to think about issues other than how to benefit Hollywood and the equivalent. It stood up to those interests around the world. It stood up to this form of northern extremism. Now, some think that opportunity for that strength, for that courage is fading. It seems that's possible. And it seems that if it's fading, it's the same interests, the same special interests that are diverting reform here as in the United States. I won't say that it is. It's not my place. I don't know enough. I'm eager to listen to understand whether that's true. But if it is true, you need to fight this. You need to fight this by, number one, practicing the kind of balance and celebration of creativity, respecting the rights of all artists, but respecting the rights of a culture to share in that creativity too. The kind of balance which we try to put into form when we launched Creative Commons, nowhere more importantly than here. Now, there have been some who have said you should be suspicious of Creative Commons. For after all, it comes from the United States. And I say, of course you should be suspicious of anything coming from the United States. Of course. Be suspicious. Just like you should be suspicious about the extremism of the war we export on extreme copyright protection. Be suspicious of all of it, but then reflect on the values Creative Commons stands for, and whether they resonate with this culture and this tradition. Because the values of balance and celebrated creativity are values I learned here, at the feet of the teachers on this stage, watching them create the kind of culture we could only imagine. That's number one. Number two, you need to join this fight against this kind of corruption in every collective, of every sort, fighting against the kind of corruption that distorts governments or collecting societies against the interest of those it is to represent. Because the thing we know, and I've said here before, there is no way to kill this creativity. We can only criminalize it. There's no way to stop generations of kids from around the world producing and sharing what they produce. We can only drive it underground. We can't make this generation passive the way my generation was. We can only make them, quote, pirates. The question governments around the world have got to ask is that any good? Everywhere, but especially in America, kids live in this age of prohibitions, constantly living their life against the law. But that is corrosive and corrupting of the rule of law in a democracy. You need to join us to stand up to this US extremism. Please, let Brazil lead this fight once again. Thank you very much.